RB3, Ray Bally III, Ray Bally II's son, who's also an artist, a musician, and today we're going to be talking about his fantastic new first recording, Can We Dance? So, Ray, thanks for doing this.
Hey, Dennis, thank you very much for having me.
Sure. So let's hear about the how you got interested in playing the bass and music.
Sure. So I grew up around my dad. He's a musician. I remember distinctly the moment he decided to get back into music. And I remember him always saying he couldn't find a bass player. And at this time, I was already involved in music. I was playing piano a little bit and violin in school. And I came up with a solution that if I played the bass, you'd always have a bass player. And so for my 10th birthday, I got a Fender Squire bass with the amp. I still have this bass to this day. I think he plays it actually. But that was my Christmas present, and at 10 years old, that's a very distinct picture in my household. I'm wearing SpongeBob pajamas. I have long hair. It's Christmas morning, and I have my gigantic bass. So
now, did you take lessons at that time?
Yeah. So I don't know when I started lessons, but shortly after I stopped playing the violin and the piano, and I started playing the bass full time. My dad found Andrew Platt, who used to play with Skeleton Breath. And I believe he played a show with Skeleton Breath, and that was a trio, a violin, bass, drums, original music trio. And Andrew offered to give lessons. Andrew would come from Brooklyn all the way. He'd take the train. We'd pick him up at the train station, and he would come over every Saturday, just about. And I was very lucky to have that shortly after I got that bass. Andrew definitely taught me how to play the bass, but I always say that he really taught me how to play music in a way that was meaningful and accessible to people. Those lessons continued for a long time. We covered everything from jazz to, writing music. And I really credit Andrew to a lot of my development. I had an hour lesson, and then shortly after, my brother started playing piano, which was a huge impact on my music career. He started taking a half-hour lesson after me. And so Andrew would do both, have both lessons, and growing up playing music with my brother was huge. That was kind of the next step in my development. My parents never forced me to practice.
That's good, because that has to come naturally.
Yes, it did. And having my brother playing the piano, we were always, you want to play music? Let's play this song. This is what I was working on, and we would always end up practicing every day. We just didn't call it practice. And I practiced for school performances and stuff that required me to rehearse a little bit more. But I credit my brother to that development. I started playing upright bass shortly after that. Again, they needed bass players, and this is one of the themes probably of this episode. And it just made sense. They predicted I was going to be tall, which always helps to play the bass, and having kind of a long arm and a long hand helps quite a bit. But I started playing the upright bass after that, and my first upright bass, my uncle Gary, he was a musician. He worked in alto music in Orange County, New York, and I was lugging a school bass from school to home. And at 10 or 11 years old, that's not really feasible. And so Uncle Gary said, "You're looking for a bass? I have a bass. I just got one, $150, which is unheard of for an upright bass."
Yeah, it is.
That's how much he paid for it, and he sold to us when I was young, and I had my own bass at home.
Oh man, that's fantastic.
It was a pretty rough bass, and I recently got the new bass when I moved to Baltimore. Decided to get a more serious instrument. I still keep that bass and play it, as needed, and definitely at harsh weather gigs. But my current bass is definitely professional level.
Well, I did see Skeleton Breath. They did when I did a solo show at the Cake Shop in New York. That's how I actually met those guys too, Skeleton Breath, way back when, and they were just absolute phenomenal.
They are phenomenal, and Andrew was a very kind of mild, quiet guy.
He was.
He still is. and you know, always friendly, but he was quiet to himself.
He was.
And I remember distinctly my dad taking me to go see them play. I think it was at a
Oh,
church in the Hudson Valley,
okay.
and I was shocked because they play some pretty hardcore music.
They did.
And yeah, and I was kind of surprised, and I wasn't really prepared for it because that's not the music we were really studying. But it was pretty amazing to hear all of that, and they're an amazing band. They still have their CDs, and definitely worth listening to.
I just felt bad they never did a live record though,
Mm-hmm.
because their shows live were so different. Their studio recordings were good, but the live show was really, and the first drummer that they had really was phenomenal. So it was a tight group there.
Yeah.
So then you started doing. Then you played with other local.
Yeah, I
Kids with
started
high
playing my
school.
dad full time, and then I picked up playing in jazz bands in school. That was kind of the next step for me. My dad would take me on the road, and we played some great gigs. We played some not so great gigs, and
Yeah.
but it was great to have that experience, kind of touring. Lightly using that term, touring, but
Yeah.
going up and down East Coast playing shows. Sometimes just me and him. So there was a lot of trust in that musical relationship.
That's great.
And I was featured on some of the early albums, and then I eventually kind of became the full-time bass player until I moved away for him.
Yeah, you
So,
played some great bass on some of his records. I mean,
yeah.
they were really good. I mean, it really stands out. Fader record especially really shines, I'll tell you. It was really well done. So now let's talk a little bit about this record, which I was very fortunate to produce here at my home studio here.
I was fortunate to have you produce it as well.
Well, thank you. But you really you banged it out like one take done, and then the overdubs. And where'd you get the songs? Were they around for a while, or were they new?
I don't really have a timeline. I don't really know where they came around. I can tell you the final track on the album, Pearly Gates. I was gifted a 12-string guitar that wasn't being used. It was great quality, and so I started listening to that music more. And I don't play guitar well, but I have now started to play it a little bit more, especially the 12-string. It feels more like a bass to me almost, with the neck and the power.
Right.
And the low end kind of feels more familiar than a guitar. So that one, I was sort of looking into that music and playing those tracks. And that was, I had a beautiful outside porch, so I'd play a lot of 12-string music as loud as I could, because it wasn't going to bother anybody in the countryside. The other tracks, I don't necessarily know when they were written. I think "Can We Dance" was probably the first one that I wrote. But I'll talk about like how I write these songs.
Sure, let's hear it.
So I use a lot of. I've kind of realized I'm an avid moviegoer. We have great movie theaters in Baltimore, and I go probably weekly, at least not, if not twice a week, to go to the movies. And I realized I was going to the movies for not inspiration, but for the images more than the story and the plot. And I thought about what I studied in college, and that was like I was very interested in imagism, which is William Carlos Williams, HD. That school at the turn of the century, 1920s, around then. But their response to modernism is to just deal with the image and pursue the image as intently as you can. And that doesn't necessarily mean through detail, but it can be sensory or just even literary exploration of the image, and image in the larger sense of not necessarily a painting or a photograph, but the image of the imagism that literature evokes, that music evokes. So I started going to the movies pretty regularly in college, and I realized certain images were really sticking with me, and images in that sense. And some of these songs I can actually point to exact movies and even moments in movies that I've sort of led to these songs. And I wouldn't say that they're not a summary or based on those images or those scenes of the movies, but they're more ekphrastic in the sort of the Renaissance sense, where you're taking one form of art and sort of taking the essence of it and moving into another form of art. You oftentimes see that with poetry and painting in the Renaissance, but I
Right,
guess I'm doing
right.
that with music and movies. And I'd like to produce a movie at some point. You know, I'm very interested in the movie.
I love the song Avalanche. I think that's really a fantastic song. I mean, it should get radio play. It's that good.
Thank you, thank you.
It
Yeah,
really,
I'm not sure where that was. I don't know if that's from an image, but you know, I also find myself, as I'm learning about myself as a songwriter, narrative is pretty important, and I try to resist, you know, that. But I wouldn't say it's based on my life in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, you know, the artist is involved in the process, but the other thing that informs my songwriting and my lyrics is negative capability. It's a term that Keats, the Romantic poet in the 19th century, coined in a letter to his brother about. He was writing about how Shakespeare writes and why is Shakespeare able to assume all of these personalities. He has no idea what it's like to be a 10-year-old boy, right? That's a
right.
distant thing. Or, you know, a king, a dying king. He doesn't really know what that's like, but he's able to write those parts so seamlessly. And Keats says that basically you have to suppress yourself in order to go to the unknown. And I did a lot of writing about this in college. I interviewed Bern Nix, who has an album,
Oh yeah,
Negative Capability, and
your dad loved him. He was quite an
and
artist.
I
Yeah.
grew up around seeing Bern as well, and that's a great
Oh,
album,
okay.
Negative Capability. And I talked to Bern, you know, who's titling this album. What is this? And we had dinner, and I interviewed him for a school project. But the idea is, what's beyond us is a lot more vast than what we have.
Right.
And
I
so if you
agree.
can access what's beyond and access images and narratives that are not related to you, you have an unlimited bank to pull from. You have
Right.
unlimited funds to supply whatever ideas, whatever themes you want to supply. And regardless, though, you're going to have yourself in these stories and in these works of art. You cannot separate yourself from that.
Right.
But I think there's a lot of success when you tend to put yourself into that movie space of the image and of the movement, as opposed to, say, writing from, I want to write a song about what happened yesterday. And that's a very valid way to go, but I don't find that works for me.
Yeah. Well, what I find interesting is I heard somebody say that you know, when you listen to a song that brings back a memory, like where you were, like music can do that to you. Like, or if you were on a beach or you were somewhere, that whole image, that whole scene comes back to you, that whole visualization from that song.
Exactly.
Because you live that song at that period, and the brain has a way of bringing that all back again.
And the brain also has a way of assuming that too, because you don't, just because I write a song about dancing in the kitchen, you know, and maybe a struggle in the kitchen, I can release that, and I have no responsibility for how you receive that. It can be as clear or as clear cut as you want it, but your interpretation and how you respond to that image, assuming that image or not, you do that. And the feedback I get about that song is that people always say, I love to dance in the kitchen. And I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't
Oh,
interview people, and I don't even know if I like to dance in the kitchen. I do now, but
right.
just releasing that idea, releasing that sound, releasing those words to the greater people evokes images that I can't control. And if you feel like
Right.
you're on the beach, you know, in Normandy, I've never been,
Yeah.
but you may feel that way. You know, and Avalanche is a very tight-knit track. The words are moving very quickly. I kind of tried to pack the lines in and think about the meter and the rhythm of the words more so than the meaning sometimes. But it fortunately worked out. But that's such an extreme story, right?
Yeah.
You know, and that doesn't apply to people, but it evokes an image, and even the rhythm evokes the image of this journey, this sort of 4-part journey where you're breaking things along the way.
Well, you must have been well rehearsed, because you came in and just, you know, there was no seconds. It was just done. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean,
how you did that.
I appreciate you working with me in that way and realizing that's how I wanted to work, because painstakingness that's not the kind of musician I am. And Yeah, I did play my music a lot in this. What I had going to my advantage was I was the only musician on this album. So
Right.
to my advantage, I knew what I was going to be playing, and when I was overdubbing some of the parts, I knew what was going to happen, and I knew what I was going to end up doing in the end, whether or not I acknowledged that. Um, Playing my music with other musicians, though, it's interesting. These songs take totally different shapes and forms. I'm playing a lot of bluegrass here in Baltimore, and
Oh, you are? Okay.
yep, and we're almost at a bluegrass version of some of these songs. "Can We Dance" is almost at a bluegrass version, if you can imagine
Boy,
that.
I'd love to hear that.
Um,
Are you playing full time? I mean, besides your job, you're playing weekends
yep, I
these
try and
things?
play. I try and play as much as I can. Music has always been, something I want to pack my schedule with. It
You
as
should.
you know, it's a great way to heal yourself and
It
get yourself
is.
out in there and talk to people. It's a really important part of my schedule and my daily routine, even. But I play most weekends, and I try and play weeknights as well, wherever. Luckily, there's a very good music scene here,
Mm.
and being a bass player, like I said, you're in demand, and I'm very fortunate that
Oh,
word has
yeah.
gotten
Bass
out, and
players are.
people recommend me, and there's no shortage of work here for me here. I've got a gig this Saturday. I've got 2 gigs next weekend, maybe a third. So,
Oh,
um,
wow. Yeah, that's
yeah.
great that you're playing and you're enjoying it. And how about the people you play with? Is this a lot of cover songs or mostly?
So that's an interesting, earlier in my music career, I was very staunchly against covers. I only wanted to play one cover, if that, and it had to be a very valuable cover. I
Right.
don't, valuable to the band, valuable to us, not necessarily to the venue or the audience or the occasion. But as I started playing more country and bluegrass music here, I've definitely loosened up on that. And there's the American Songbook in jazz and the standards in jazz, which I'm very familiar with, and to an extent those are covers, with a lot more leeway. But I kind of loosened up about that. So we play a lot of covers. We do have original music as well. I haven't been playing my originals as much and performing my my album, I guess I could say. I have been going to some open mics down here, but that's about the extent of it. It's hard for me to put a band together, I feel like, with this music,
Mm.
because it can be so widely interpreted. And
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to any interpretation of my music. If Dennis Young wanted to do a cover of Avalanche, I would,
Yeah.
marimba
You never
only,
know.
I would be on board with that.
You never know.
You never
That could
know.
happen. So, are there plans for more recordings after
Yeah, I
this?
would love to. I would love to record more. It's funny how you reach an impasse with your work, and it's sometimes I tend to have tons of melody material. I
Mm.
usually start with a melody, and then kind of fill in harmony after that, if necessary. Even sometimes I don't even know the chords. Part of that, I guess I'll speak to that if that's okay.
Sure. Go ahead.
When I went to jazz camp, this was another formative part of my songwriting process. I went to jazz camp as a kid. I got a great deal because I was a bass player, so I ended up going for a lot more than I expected to,
Hmm.
just to fill in some of the combos. And I remember in the bass master class, we had all the upright basses together, all the electric basses together, and the instructor said, how many people go right to the piano for composition or guitar because it's a chordal instrument? And I was a kid, so I don't really remember what the reaction was. But yeah, I go to the piano often if I want to sing something or compose. And they talked about the importance of composing on your instrument and
Hmm.
how you know your instrument the best, and you know the qualities of your instrument, and you know how you're going to react to your instrument. And they cited Charles Mingus as a big composer on the bass, and if you listen to his music, it makes sense. And it's not to say that the piano doesn't have a place, or the guitar, chordal instruments don't have a place, but I will oftentimes go to them after the fact, if I need to even. But I always start with the bass for my composition, because this is bass-driven music. The guitar parts I was even hesitant to add, but I was interested in the 12-string at the time, and I think it adds a nice rhythm to it.
It does.
But composing on the bass leads to melody, and that's usually how I start. At first, my melodies were very synchronistic. So whatever I was playing on the bass, I was singing, because that's about the only thing I could do. So if you follow the bass lines in a lot of them, especially like Can We Dance, the melody I'm singing and the bass line are almost the same, which work out well because I don't think I have a very bass-centric voice. So it's a nice balance. So that's generally how I do it. And that's just, you know, it can be anything from noodling to trying to execute exercises to just, oh, I have a sound and I want to do it on the bass. And the bass has limitations, and it also has really high ceilings for what it can handle. And then I usually follow up with lyrics. Occasionally it's reverse. Right now I'm struggling to write lyrics, and I think I just need to sit down and with a pen and paper. And my brother was visiting for the holiday, and I saw him with a notebook furiously writing all, you know, for an hour at a time. And I was
some
like,
people are good at that.
I need to sit down and write, you know. That's kind of what's holding me up right now. But I started at a very fundamental point with this stuff. You know, melody is my top priority. Melody and rhythm are my top priority. Harmony, you know, not to say it isn't important, but that can be interpreted however it wants to be. I have a very open, you know, as I grew up around Bern Nix and sort of the freer jazz movement, harmony can take a back seat if it needs to. But lyrics are the toughest thing right now for me.
Now, do you write out the scores, or is this all by?
I have some notation that I do if I need to. Fortunately, I've been really interested in short form songs. So, you know, stuff that's pretty short. I was challenging myself to write songs that were under 2 minutes. I think there's a lot of value in that in response to sort of the 10-minute, you know, overture.
Right.
But I was interested in short form music. Brad Kleinman definitely affected my interest in that. Big influence on my.
He's quite incredible with the way he comes up with even backing vocals so fast, and he's just a natural.
I heard listening to his album, I was like, this is where I want to record. This is who I want to produce my album, because, you know, you have the sound that I want, and, you know, whether that's the chicken or the egg, I don't know, but it's there, and that's what
it worked. It worked for this record.
Yeah,
it really did, and for Brad's record too. I mean, but once again, he came in prepared. Everything, you know, my job was easy because you guys made it easy. You had it already planned out. You played it right. You recorded it right. So
yeah, and as far as right, you know, like there's a lot of, I'm not playing traditional music. I'm not playing music that kind of sets me into a cage that I have to record. I'm playing a bass line, right? And I can do anything I want with it. And I'm playing a bass line, and I'm almost singing a bass line at this point, as how I view it. And I'm a pretty wide open interpretation of music. So
now there's
not really any mistakes to be made.
Now you can sing and play at the same time, right? Pretty much.
I can, yeah. And as
that's a gift.
Yeah, as I'm working on that, I'm starting to notice that my melodies are going in different directions. So I'm now more able to sing lines that I'm not playing and play lines that I'm not singing. So I'm having more of a polyphonic moment, which is nice. I'm still committed to that, and I have a heavy interest in unison. Like, there's a lot of times where I'll opt, you know, someone will say, oh, do you want to put a harmony on this? I'll say, no, I want you to sing it as well with me. I think there's a lot of value in unison and music that uses unison, because just the slight quality of the voice can almost make a harmonization of its own, just to change different in harmony. And I love music where you're not sure if there's a harmony or not. And I love music where there's a heavy-handed harmony. That's great too. But I'm very interested in sort of, did I hear that note, or is it just suggested, or, you know, is it double tracked? I really had a lot of fun double tracking my vocal. I've never done that before. And I want to thank you for suggesting that, because that was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, that was great. It made it made a difference.
Yep.
And you have a very distinct voice that came through on that record. It's a great record. And then as far as improvisation, have you played in groups where you just improv, where there was nothing, just?
Sure. Yeah, I
That's
do.
always fun.
Yeah, I'm deeply committed to that stuff too. It's not as common here. There's a monthly jam session that I occasionally will go to at a used bookstore, actually, that's completely free improv. And then it's a very interesting structure. They break you up in groups, and you know, you can kind of pick who you want to play with in smaller groups as well. but yeah, I'm deeply interested in improvisational music. That's kind of where my allegiance is, whether that be, jazz, bluegrass, free improv, noise music. I do love my hammered out Bach and Beethoven. I love all that,
Yeah.
but
Hmm.
at the
Well,
same
keep an
time,
open mind to that, because
I love
that's
my Black Sabbath, but
yeah. I mean, you got to be open to all types of music.
sure.
That's
And
what
I really pride myself on being a musician who can play with anyone at any time, any music,
that's what's hard about somebody that's trained as a classical musician. They're so structured in that has to be written and it has to be. There's a lady, Martha Mook, who I just interviewed. She teaches a course. She's a professional violinist, but she teaches a course about some of the players, young college students, or that how to improv because
hmm
they don't know improvisation.
yeah.
They're learning it, and it opens their mind to all types of
Yeah,
ideas and
and it goes
expression.
back to the less you try and think your way through it, and the less you try and execute yourself, and you execute what you get to access the unknown, and that's really what's exciting for me when you go to a place. It's not. I was talking to my brother about this. I'm very interested in grammar as well, and you probably will catch some of that on the album the closer you listen.
Right.
Um, but are you a vessel or do you go to? So
Hmm.
does it come to you or does it go, or do you go somewhere? And
Right.
I'm a big believer in you go somewhere, right? We go out of key, we go out to that outer space, we go, and I think the vessel is an important place too. That can be a very intimate, honest, vulnerable moment. But for me, the excitement in music is going out, going to the uncharted,
Yeah. Keep
just
that
saying,
up.
hey, self, take a back seat and let the process work itself out. Let the unknown kind of fester and, make a milieu of something, some
Well,
sorts.
especially when you're playing with musicians like that, where you don't even have to think. They know what you're doing, and the chemistry is such an important factor, especially playing with other artists. I
Yep.
mean, my experience with that.
Yeah,
You
and I
know
played
that.
a lot of jam sessions now too. I played some jazz jam sessions. I play a lot of bluegrass jam sessions, and that's been really important for my development because you don't know who you're going to play with. You don't know the song necessarily, which has never bothered me.
Right.
Those two things, but you don't necessarily know what you can do and what's going to work and what's not going to work, right?
Right.
Because playing your own music, you can do. I can do anything I want. Playing your music, I can do anything I want.
Right.
We have a trust in ourselves. But when someone else is
Right.
depending on you, doesn't necessarily always perform. You got to be solid and you got to deliver what they want, kind of.
That's right.
Um,
Right.
and I can do that too. That's it's been a big part of my development, learning to play what people want almost.
Well, you've been doing a great job so far. Now, where can they? Now, I know you can find this on Bandcamp, and are you going to be sell? I know. I think whether it's going for like $10.
Yeah,
So-
$5 or $10. What I think $10 is right though.
and then your mother did this back.
Yeah, so
Correct.
the
Talk about
yeah,
her a little
that's
bit. She's an artist too.
yep, she's a visual artist. So the photograph was taken in Ithaca.
Hmm.
My friend is a professional photographer, Seth Strickland, and he's always got a camera with him. And I don't know, I think we were on a back porch somewhere,
Hmm.
and he got that picture. It was I like to refer to that as Red Hat Ray. This is
Yeah,
Red
that's
Hat
funny.
Ray, and he knew right away. He was like, "This is an album cover," and
Oh,
that kind of helped me. Having a visualization takes care of that. Yeah, my mother's a professional artist, and she's been designing a lot of Neptune, my brother's band's work,
hmm.
and I was like, I need to cash in on that too.
Yeah. Why not?
So that piece is called Innisfree. It's based on William
There
Butler
it is
Yeats.
again.
Yeah,
There it
William
is.
Butler Yeats's poem,
Oh, okay.
and a Roman aqueducts painting that she was doing for a show, and it's a great poem. The Lake Isle of Innisfree, but I think that there's, the opening line of that is, "I will arise and go now and go to Innisfree," and Innisfree's, it's debatable whether it's a place or not. I think I don't remember exactly, but
Hmm.
Yeats was interested in fairies. Yeats was interested in sort of that unknown Irish revival. He was huge for that, and mysticism. So
Right.
it seemed like a good fit. It was a pretty good work for her. That was unexpected success, and I just thought, kind of looks like the front a little bit with the
Yeah, it really
kind
does.
of
I
a
mean,
more colorful front.
it's nice
cover.
you got your mother involved with this, and
Oh yeah,
and your dad involved with indirectly with me helping you on
I have a
this.
lot of
And
good artists on my team, and
that's
I want to
good.
because I want to be a good team member for a lot of different artists. I've recorded on your music, and hopefully I'll record some more on Brad's music.
I hope
But
so.
I'm very fortunate to have that. And then when it's time for me to say, "Hey, team, let's put this album out," even though it's a solo album, there are many hands. Having the studio full of musicians that I trust and care about, it's invaluable.
Well, next time you want to do another record, you're more than happy to come down
I
here.
think so. Maybe I should.
Free
Maybe I
of charge.
should. What's that?
I don't charge friends.
Oh
And
no, I appreciate it, and
no,
it's exciting to work with you. So
thanks. And it was great. It was a lot of fun,
it was
because
a lot of fun,
it,
and
it, there was no pressure. It just felt like natural, and it
yeah,
just happened. That's what's
yep,
nice
yep.
about it.
Yep,
You're
and
here working,
I haven't sung that much before, and especially and you, like I said, you made the atmosphere very comfortable, and having that team of musicians, and having those people saying, "This is your album cover," this is how we're gonna order the tracks, this is what I'm thinking. It's huge.
if
It's
it's
huge.
uncomfortable, it's not going to happen good.
No,
It's going to be too much pressure.
And I've had plenty of experiences like that in the studio, and it's a wash.
Yeah, and you end up with the stress, and then you have a stressful engineer,
Yep.
and those guys can get very ornery pretty fast.
And like you were saying with Skeleton Breath, right? The album, the live performances can be totally different, and I don't really want that to be the case.
Okay.
It should be for me, my music I think is very dynamic, and it happens in the moment and happens every time. We've been expanding Can We Dance to have a huge free improv section.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, in between the verses, and sometimes it hits, and sometimes it's like, let's go back to the original. But the music is meant to be sort of performed in a very active way.
There's a famous studio down there in Baltimore, Orion Studios. Have you heard of them?
I haven't heard of them, no.
Gaithersburg was a big epicenter for like progressive music in the late 70s.
Cool.
And the guy